Really, my focus for this presentation is I'll just spend a few minutes getting you acclimated to the Acumatica software itself for anybody that hasn't seen it, and then I'm going to really be focusing on the manufacturing functionality here. So I'll take you through a bill of materials and the setup there. We will use that bill of materials to process a work order, and then I'll go through, talk about MRP, talk about scheduling, materials, labor, and try to fit that within the time frame we have here. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. A couple of housekeeping items for those of you that are not aware. Acumatica is a cloud-based system. We do offer multiple deployment methods. I actually believe we are the only vendor in the industry that will allow you to deploy either on-premise or in the cloud. But as long as you have access to the internet, you're going to have access to Acumatica. I'm doing this demo from a laptop today, but I could do this exact same thing or access this same data from a tablet or from a smartphone. We do have a mobile app, so really for those of you looking for that modern type of access and access from a smartphone, we have you covered there. I'll also just note quickly that the system is completely based on responsive design, so when I minimize my screen, just notice that all of my widgets on my screen are responding to the size of the window there. So again, you'll see that same thing from a tablet or a smartphone, always going to resize what you're seeing in Acumatica to fit the access point of the hardware that you're using. Now, we are a role-based system, so everybody is only going to have access to the screens, fields, transactions that they need to do their job. Probably nobody from the shop floor should be touching maybe a balance sheet or some of the other financial statements, so you will see that type of role-based access throughout Acumatica. I will also call out over on the left-hand side, just purely from a structure standpoint, we have organized Acumatica based on the concept of workspaces. So the workspaces are really intended to group together different business process areas, give more efficiency to the users within those workspaces, and just really put the materials that they would need right at their fingertips. So somebody who's managing bills of materials, maybe somebody from the engineering team, might only have access to maybe the bills of material workspace and the production orders workspace. Perhaps they won't ever be touching payables or receivables. So just keep that in mind. The workspaces and the permissions will be more narrow depending on the user that's logged in. But I'm an admin today, so of course I'll be able to show you everything. And you'll see me navigating through these workspaces throughout the course of the demo. You'll find within each one of those workspaces there's going to be associated reports. So for example, if I'm looking for a sales order report, I can find it directly in that sales order workspace, versus if I'm looking for a production order report, I'll be able to find that directly in my production workspace. And like I said, these are going to be used throughout the course of the demo, so I won't spend too much time there just yet, but hoping that you can see how that would allow you to navigate through the system a bit more easily. And if not, if you're looking to go one step further, we do always have the universal search as well. The universal search can really be thought of kind of like a Google for Acumatica search engine on your own data, if you will. So just as an example, I'll type in invoice here. You'll see right in real time there's a couple of categories that get returned back for me. So first of all, menu items. I'm going to see all of the different menu items in the system that I might be looking for. If I was looking to maybe run a pro forma invoice, or I was looking to generate a campaign invoice, I'm going to see all of those available possibilities here. I'm also going to have full access to a knowledge base throughout Acumatica. So if you're a new user looking for help on a particular area, or a veteran user that's looking for a knowledge base, the help articles are very detailed. They go really deep as far as things like system configuration, processes, workflows. So I highly recommend the help articles and using the search to get there. Additionally, we do support document management. So document management for the manufacturers on the phone, you can think of this as being able to support things like different drawings that you might want to attach to a bill of materials, maybe a physical copy of a vendor invoice that you wanted to upload to an AP bill. So we can get those documents into the system, attach them to the respective records, and they become searchable using the universal search. And then finally, just transactions and profiles. Maybe you're looking for a specific invoice number, a specific work order number. You can go ahead and type in what you're searching for, pull that back right away in real time, and get some answers to your questions nice and quickly and easily by doing so. And then really the last item that I will spend a moment on here, just as far as an overview before I get into the manufacturing specific information, is going to be dashboards. This screen, this colorful screen that you've been seeing on my homepage here, those dashboards are real-time. They're completely personalizable based on the user. And they're also, the main goal with them is to provide actionable insight. So what we mean by that is we're not only showing you all of these different key performance indicators or charts or trend graphs that require your attention, but instead we're giving you the data which you can then drill down to take action on. So I see all of the invoices out here based on work orders that need to be invoiced. I can drill right down into that information to start to take action. I'm seeing here a listing of some of the work orders that I have in process. Again, can drill right down into that information to start to take action. So it's not just about giving you that visibility into your data, but it's then allowing you to take the additional step to make some decisions and take some actions on that data. You're seeing from this dashboard, and this is just one example of many dashboards that are out there, that we can support different types of widgets. So these colorful squares that you're seeing in the top right, those would be examples of key performance indicators. These can be color-coded, so if you wanted to flash something in bright red, that was maybe a problem, versus something in green that was in the okay zone, if you will. You can start to categorize your dashboards based on colors if you would like, and really just use these to personalize it to the individual. So just for a moment, I'll flip over to something like a controller and just take a look at how different that dashboard is now. It's no longer showing me, a production summary. It's not showing me my production forecast anymore. But now when I'm a controller, I'm looking directly at financial information. I'm seeing what the churn is like. I'm seeing who my top AR balances are. So you can use these dashboards to really fit the individual that is utilizing it. You can add new content very easily, remove content that isn't as important to you very easily, and it does not require a developer to make those kind of changes. All right, so that's my, let's see, about 5 to 10 minute overview there just to get us started. Now, what I'm going to be focusing on for the remainder of the presentation is the manufacturing features. And you will notice over on the left-hand side, I have a number of manufacturing workspaces, or manufacturing modules is another way to think of it. So where I'm going to get us started is in the Bill of Materials workspace. And the first thing that I'll do is I'll just pull up a bill of materials for the item that I'm going to be working with. So let me select this one down at the bottom here. And a couple of things to get us started. Now, when we're looking at the bill of materials screen, and you'll see this through other screens throughout Acumatica, it's pretty universal, we will typically have our summary section up here in the top. And down in the bottom is where we start to fill out the details of that document that we're working on. So in the summary section, we have the finished good that we're actually going to be creating or producing. Underneath that, you'll see the warehouse that this bill of materials is tied to. So you can actually have multiple active bills of materials for the same item, and you can have a different bill of materials based on the warehouse. So having that warehouse functionality in there would allow you to have those multiple active bills of materials for one item. as well as revision control. We're seeing a lot more need for revision support and engineering change control. So we do support those revisions for you. We'll allow you to have history into past revisions, so you can always see the materials that might have been used in a revision B versus a revision D. And whenever this checkbox here for the hold is removed, that's when that revision will become active. So this is the bill of materials that I'm going to be working with, and that's the summary of the item. Now, the details of the item, or I should say the details of the bill of materials for this item, start to come down in the middle as well as in the bottom. So let me just highlight what we're looking at, and I can zoom in a little bit if that's easier. Another side note, I can drop off those workspaces over on the left just to give me some more real estate on the screen. And what I'm looking at here is, first of all, we have 3 operations for this particular finished good on this bill of materials. I'm looking at an assembly operation. There is some subcontracted work in there. So if you have any outside processes that need to be completed, you could set up an operation for those activities if you would like. And then there's also a stock and ship operation. There could be really as many operations as you need. If you wanted to add something in like a packaging or an inspection operation, just keep that in mind. We can certainly tweak these to meet your own bill of material needs. We could also even do an import of an existing bill of materials. If you did not want to go in and add these items line by line, we do support CSV imports. So you could always bring that from an outside system, load it right into Acumatica, and start to work with that data. Within Acumatica, we do blend the operation steps with the materials. So if you look down at the bottom of the screen, what's actually happening here is we're saying the assembly operation is going to take place in this work center. So work center 10, that carries its own costs, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But beyond that, these are the materials that are actually needed for the assembly operation. And the reason I know that is because each line, each operation line, is tagged to these 4 tabs at the bottom of the screen. So when I go over to my stock and ship operation, notice that there are no materials appearing there because I really only need, in this example, materials in the assembly operation, and perhaps 1 item for the subcontracted work. So you can start to tag your materials to individual operations by blending them together on your bill of materials. So there's no separate setup required there. Then within that, like I mentioned, I'll talk more about these tabs at the bottom in just a second, but I'm going to open this work center here for just a moment. And what the work center is showing us is you can define default settings either at the work center level or at the bill of materials level. So what I'm saying here on the work center setup is any time that I process any production through this work center, these are the settings that I would like to use. I'd like to use a standard cost of 20. You can also decide what you want your basis for capacity utilization to be. It can either currently be based on a crew size, so how many people you have on the shop floor, or it can be based on machine time right now. So up to you how you would like to define the basis for capacity within a work center. We do support scrap and scrap actions. So we can decide if you'd like to take no action on scrap, if you'd like to write off the costs, or you could quarantine the materials and actually put them into a separate location, perhaps send them through inspection and put them back onto the shop floor if needed. And down at the bottom here, I won't go through every single tab and field, but just highlighting where some of these costs are going to come from at the work center level. We can support multiple shifts. Those shifts can be tagged to individual calendars. So if you're needing to pay more for a holiday or for overtime, we can start to calculate those types of labor costs for you here, as well as overhead. Overhead can be fixed if you would like to use fixed costs. It can also be variable based on a number of different factors. So it can be variable based on labor costs, it can be variable based on quantities, it can be variable based on amounts. So there's a number of different ways you can set up that overhead, and you can do it at the work center level, like I'm highlighting here, and you can also do it at the bill of materials level. So if one bill of material is going to get different overhead costs than another, you can define that on the BOM level rather than here at the work center level. Additionally, you can set up multiple machines and capture machine costs at the work center level. Those machines can be tied to their own standard costs as well as to their own general ledger accounts. So if you wanted to capture separate costs for machines in different machine accounts, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to back out of that work center just so we can get through the rest of the bill of materials setup here. And down at the bottom, I talked briefly about the materials, but just note that this is where you're going to define things such as the quantity that is required for that particular item, your unit costs, multiple units of measure can be supported, and then this is where we get into the piece about scrap. I mentioned your scrap actions, but you can also define a predefined scrap factor on that bill of materials if needed. That way MRP can help you to calculate the correct amount of materials if some scrap is going to be anticipated there. And one more thing I'll highlight actually about the materials, we do support both regular material types as well as phantom bills of material types. So what that would mean is if you have a subassembly or a finished good that has subassemblies within there, and you really are looking to flatten out the bill of materials, you don't want to trigger as many associated work orders, you can use a phantom item to just designate that that item does not necessarily need a separate work order. I do want to highlight actually that these materials are set up to be a multi-level in this example. So some of these items are actually sub-assemblies, and the result is going to be when I generate a work order for this top level item, Acumatica is going to help me plan the associated work orders for these sub-assemblies down at the bottom. And just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to select my reports and my multi-level just to highlight that for us. So what we're looking at here, and this is a little bit different from some other systems out there, our top level item does not get a number. I know sometimes that top level item is your level 0 or your level 1. In Acumatica, the finished good does not get a number. The first number that you're going to see is level 0. So level 0 is all of your sub-assemblies or your items that are going into that top level. So here I have subassembly number 1, and then there's a couple additional level 0 items down at the bottom here. I'm additionally going to see all of the items in level 1 is everything that is going into this item right here. So these are the components that are going into this subassembly. What I'm getting at is we certainly do support multi-level. I'm told that we can go up to 99 levels in a bill of materials, but I've never seen it happen. So just a side note for everybody on the phone if you're wondering about how far we can go. Now, beyond the materials, you can also set up steps for your operations. If I do want to make any changes to the bill of materials, I do have to put it on hold. So if I wanted to add some steps in here, just as an example, maybe I want to let those working on the shop floor know to reference a particular drawing when they're going through and doing the assembly. I can include that step out on the job traveler or the production ticket by adding it to my bill of materials. And I can even attach additional notes or files here. So if I wanted to attach a physical copy of the drawing at this point, we even have some clients that are attaching video files here. So they're having their workers watch a video of how to complete that particular operation. You can include that type of file at this level as well. And then just the piece I was mentioning, you can define overhead at the bill of materials level versus the work center level if that's an organizational preference. and we do support tooling costs as well. So if you'd like to consume the cost of not only the machines that are being utilized, but actually the smaller tool items that are being utilized, you can set that up here at the bill of materials level. All right, so that's mainly it as far as setup. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through an example of creating this item. So I'll use a make-to-order example. What I can do is start with a sales order. And I'm going to create a sales order for this item, and then we'll take it through a production run. So that's where I'm heading next. And to do so, I'm going to navigate over here to my sales orders workspace, have this big tile available to me where I can easily create a new sales order. And this would be called a production pull within the Macola system. So I'm going to do a sales order to a work order. We're just really tying those two together here within Acumatica. And to do that, I'll select my magnifying glass for a customer. I could also just type in the customer I wanted to add to that order. Either way will get you the same result. There are a couple of functions here. I know we're really more intending to see the manufacturing functionality, but just as a side note, like I said, the screens are going to be pretty consistent throughout Acumatica, so you'll be able to do things like drag and drop columns. If I wanted my unit of measure column closer to the left, if that's one of the most important fields for me, I can easily drag and drop that. You can also very easily add and remove columns here. So let's look, we have a discount code set up on the line level, and perhaps I'm not offering discounts, so I want to remove that. I can select that item, drop it off, and you'll see it disappear from the screen. Let's do something like, I'll take my shipping rule. I'll drop that off the screen, and when I say OK, this item is now going to no longer be available on the line level. So what I'm getting at, doesn't take a developer to make these types of screen changes. If you would like your users to have that flexibility, you can present that to them, and if not, you can keep it more at the system admin level to make those changes for your users. One more thing I'll highlight here, I talked about importing functionality on the bill of materials level, but same thing on the sales order level. If you're getting perhaps a customer PO and you'd like to upload those line items into a sales order, you can do that very quickly and easily here. And this Add Stock Item button is really like an order pad, so you can take a look at past order history if there's any need to do so. Show me everything we've sold to this particular customer since 2015. Acumatica is going to return all of those items, show me a full order history, show me pricing history. So if I wanted to match a price that we offered to this customer in 2016, for example, I can get that type of visibility by just entering a few small clicks on the sales order entry screen. All right, but let's add in the item we've been talking about here. The one that we added the bill of materials for was item 149300. That's the one I'd like. I talked about the unit of measure support, but if you did have multiple units of measure that you're selling in, you can define that information here. I'm also going to immediately get visibility into my on-hand inventory. So if I look down at the bottom of the screen, when I have this line item selected, it's showing me that I have 0 of these on hand right now. So of course, we need to go out and create a production order or a work order, same terminology, to fulfill the demand for this sales order. So to do that, I'm going to head up to Actions and Production Orders. This is one way to do it, just by simply selecting to link the production order from the sales order itself. We do also have a separate screen called Create Production Orders, so if you needed to do this in bulk, if you're looking at really high volume make-to-order scenarios, you could look at all of those orders at once that are ready to have work orders created for them and actually do that in a batch or on a schedule. But I'm just going to do it from the sales order level and say that we're ready to move forward with this particular work order. Now, if you remember, this bill of materials had subassemblies tied to it. So what we're going to do is go get an understanding of how those subassemblies are going to be planned through the MRP module, and we can create multiple work orders to fulfill the demand for this one sales order. If I was using those phantom bill of materials, I could flatten it out, but in my example, we will have a few different work orders tied to this one sales order. Okay? So at this point, we have sales order number 3741 is the one that we're going to be working with, which is tied to production order number 361, and I'll drill right into that order for a moment here. And as I do that, just a couple of things I want to review on the production order itself. First of all, I'm going to see under the General tab some information like the quantity that we're producing. I am going to see information around scheduling dates. So if I had a particular manufacturing lead time set up for this item, say I know it's going to take me 9 days to manufacture this good, I could set up that lead time, and when I use my fixed manufacturing lead times for my order dates, Acumatica would calculate the appropriate start date based on that promise date. So the system could tell me you have a lead time of 9 days, you need to start this by December 1st in order to meet that promise date of the 9th. And it is going to be based on those work calendars, so it could factor out weekends, it could factor out holidays, just keeping in mind the schedules that you have set up. And then that information is going to be fed over to the master schedule, and then Acumatica is going to start letting you know when you need to schedule these items. You can enter dispatch priorities for the work orders. So dispatch priorities means exactly as it sounds. What is the scheduling priority of this order? How important is it to dispatch it out? Number 1 would be the highest dispatch. Number 10 would be the lowest. Your orders will default to a priority of 5. So the system's going to schedule all of your priority 1 orders first, going to go down that list and schedule the priority 10 orders last. And I'll show you this when I get over to the scheduling side. A couple other tabs here that I'll review quickly. One, under my References tab, I'm going to see the sales order that we are referencing back to. So what are we actually creating this demand for? As well as the source. So here's the bill of materials that we started with, which is going to bring in all of the associated costs, materials, steps, labor that I need to complete this particular production order. There are 2 tabs in here that do a great job of giving visibility into your production costs and the status. One is your Event History tab. That really acts as an audit trail for production. So if you look right now, all we've done is create the order, but when I actually release it, and release is just synonymous with we're done planning the order, so I actually want to release it out to the shop floor. I'll say release, and I'm immediately going to see a new line gets added there. So as I'm issuing materials, as I'm issuing labor to this work order, I'm going to start to see those line items get stacked up here, and the transactions will even give me a link down to the general ledger. So when I issue materials, I'll not only see a line item, but I'll actually see a link to the journal entry that was created for that particular transaction, and I'll highlight that for you as well. The Totals tab, this is a crowd favorite for manufacturers because that's giving you your job costs in a format that shows you what you plan to spend based on your bill of materials or an estimate. I haven't covered that just yet, but we do have an estimating module that would allow you to create basically a custom bill of materials for an item that has never been manufactured. It's going to take those planned costs and compare them to what you have actually spent. So as you start to issue materials, labor, overhead, you will see in real time all of those actual costs being added up here. And finally, a variance between the two. So any variance that is calculated during production, always going to be real time. So if you're seeing any particular cost spiraling, you can zoom right in and start to take action on that. Finally, the last thing I'll say from the production order level is we do support quality control. So we use attributes within Acumatica to do so. These attributes, and I apologize, I don't have any set up for this particular bill of materials, but attributes could be things like maybe you want to measure calibration, or maybe you want to measure a particular length of an item that was issued, or you'd like to get a project manager's signature to sign off during quality control. All of these things are just some examples of different quality measures that you might want to add to a bill of materials, and then during production you can go in and enter the associated quality data that was captured. Now, before we talk about issuing and purchasing the materials for this job, I'm just going to highlight quickly the production ticket. That is really your job traveler for this item. So just notice that it took my bill of materials that we originally started with, and now it's breaking it out into this very consumable type of one-sheet format where my shop floor workers can print this out, they can carry it around on a tablet if they'd like, and now they're seeing all of the operations that are required, the timing that is required for those operations, the materials, so this can also be used as a pick list, and it's even showing me the steps. If you remember when we added in to reference a particular drawing, it's showing me right on that job traveler that that's what I need to do in that operation. All right, so that is what I wanted to highlight on the production level. Now, where I'm going next is, in order to fulfill this order, we need to make sure we have the materials on hand to do so, and we also need to schedule it appropriately from our master schedule. So the way we're going to do that, there's actually two ways you can do it. If you are looking for raw material shortage for the individual order that you're working on, you would use critical materials. So what critical materials is doing is showing you a one-to-one relationship between your raw material shortage and a particular production order. So this screen is telling me, in order to make this production order, you need to purchase these materials, and or what I should say is you need to purchase this material, if you look at the source here, and you actually need to assemble these sub-assemblies. So when the source is manufacturing, those are the separate sub-assemblies that are going to be required in order to meet this demand. So critical materials would be one way to do that. I can create a purchase order or a manufacturing order directly from this screen. And the other way to do that would be through MRP. So if you're not interested at purchasing or scheduling on a one-to-one level, MRP would be the way you would look at all of your demand at once. So I'm going to take you over to MRP for a moment. I will quickly talk about the regeneration of MRP. Really what the regeneration process is it's going to look at all of your current demand. It's going to look at any actions you've taken since the last time you've regenerated, and it's going to blow down through all of those items and show you a new display of the actions that you need to take. And this happens very quickly. This is something that can be put on a schedule, so this can happen throughout the course of the day if you wanted it to happen multiple times. It could happen while nobody's in the office, so maybe you want to run this schedule overnight to regenerate your MRP, but notice it only took 5 seconds to go through my entire list of levels and give me a new display of what actions are going to be required. So to see the result of that, I'm going to take you over here to my MRP display, and I'm going to head over to the last page of this. And down at the bottom here, I'm seeing some demand that is now being brought into this screen. So if you remember, the one that we were working with was production order number 361 is the production order that I just created a few moments ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter my MRP just to that one order, just to make it a little bit easier to visualize this. So what this MRP screen is now telling me is you need to create these 3 subassembly orders in order to satisfy the demand of that particular production order. So this is going to help me schedule those sub-assemblies out. Again, those sub-assemblies can have their own lead times. So I could have the system tell me, I need to start sub-assembly number 1 by the 1st, sub-assembly number 2 by the 3rd, etc. And you can get very granular with your lead times as far as when you need to take particular actions. This is also going to show you when items need to be purchased. So you can use this as a purchasing schedule as well for your just-in-time inventory. There's kind of two different formats that you can look at this in. And just like with critical materials, but now it's looking at all of your supply and demand, you can create purchase orders directly from the screen, production orders, or even transfer orders. The nice part about this is it is going to show you where all of that demand is coming from. So you can select really any item on the MRP. If you go up here to inquiries and select the detail inquiry, it's going to show you the exact source of demand for that MRP plan that you're seeing. So here I know it's coming from production material. Here's the exact document it's related to. So I know that production order number 10, 206, and 293 are the 3 orders that are driving the demand for that item in my MRP. Just looking at time here, I'm going to try and cover the last couple of things pretty quickly. One is just I'll spend a moment on forecasting, basically just to highlight that you can do it within Acumatica. Forecasting will be an item that you can generate here. That is another thing that will get factored into the MRP. So if you wanted to set up either a regular or a seasonal forecast, factor in a growth rate, we're expecting to grow this production line by 10% next year. So help me generate a forecast, roll that into my MRP, and we'll start scheduling the production accordingly. You can also import a forecast, just like we saw with some other examples, if you're more comfortable doing that in an outside system and then doing an import into Acumatica. Now, the piece I want to cover next is if the scheduling pieces that we've talked about so far are not robust enough and you're looking to go a couple levels deeper, we've recently released what's called Advanced Planning and Scheduling. And with Advanced Planning and Scheduling, you're going to basically get a rough cut planning screen, which can act as your workbench. On this workbench, you'd be able to take a look at all of the orders out there that need to be scheduled. You're going to see them in order based on dispatch priorities. So you can adjust your dispatch priorities on this screen. You're going to see those start and end dates, and then you know when you need to go through and produce the item that is required on that production schedule. So you'll use your workbench here, and when you're ready, you can select the items that you want to place into the master schedule. To do so, you would just select that schedule button, where the item now gets placed into the entire master schedule for Acumatica. On that master schedule, you can look at it by individual production number, you can look at it by work center, and you can look at it by date ranges. So let me just back up the schedule here to give us some more data. What I'm seeing now is all of the work centers that are currently, or that do currently have demand in the schedule to be utilized. I'm seeing a couple of different examples. When the block size is 0, that's more for items that are doing infinite scheduling. We do also support finite scheduling. So if you needed to set up certain machine times that would get factored into a finite schedule for production, the system will tell you, based on that bill of materials, how many blocks you need to utilize in that work center and exactly when they should be started and ended. And there's a lot more time we could spend here on scheduling. This is a very, very high level, so I just want to at least call out some of the pieces that are there for you. But if you have questions, just please feel free to work with the algorithm team and we can get you a more detailed demonstration on this. The final piece of that would be the work center capacity is also going to help you do capacity planning. So you can select, a particular work center that you're interested in seeing the utilization for. a date range such as daily, weekly, monthly, and then you can understand how that work center is being utilized based on the production schedule at that point in time. How many items do we still have available? Is there work centers that we can fit more work orders into? And do I need to adjust anything in my schedule to support the available capacity that we have at this point in time? We do not have a visual scheduler just yet. However, it's on our roadmap to be released within the next few months, along with some Gantt chart functionality that would give you really more of a visual version of the production schedule. Now, to wrap up the demo, what you would want to do to fulfill that original production order would be to start issuing your materials and your labor against them. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can simply backflush materials and labor if that kind of after the fact costing makes more sense to your business. Backflushing would just take the costs on that bill of materials and apply them to the job after production is completed or after a particular operation is completed. The other way to do that would just be to manually issue your labor and materials. So the system can recognize, here's the work order that you are currently spending time on. Here's the materials that we're suggesting you should issue based on that bill of materials. And then you can go forward and either just go with the suggested material issue, or you can adjust accordingly. We can also do this with scan guns. So if you're asking yourself if scanning is supported, the answer is yes. So if you wanted to capture labor time on the shop floor through a quick scan, if you wanted to capture material issue on the shop floor through a quick barcode scan, we can support you on that side. And again, we'll just get into a discussion with the algorithm team if there's any reason to do so. The very final thing that I wanted to cover, I was hoping to keep this at about 45 minutes, so I've got about 2 minutes left here. The only other thing that I thought it made sense to cover was the product configurator. Like I said, there's quite a bit more that we could spend time looking at together, such as the estimating module, which I mentioned earlier. But the product configurator is what I wanted to leave you with. I understand that Macola does not have any configurator that isn't third-party today. Acumatica has one that's built right into our system. So just to highlight this for a moment, what you can do is set up different finished goods that require additional features and options to be selected during the production cycle. So in my example here, it's a configuration for single hung doors. These are all of the different features that I want the salesperson or the engineer to be able to select from. And down at the bottom is the options for those features. So I like to think of this kind of as the question we're asking about the configuration, and the option is the answer to that. So the example here is, well, what pattern do we want to use for these doors? Do we want to use a flush pattern, Avon, etc.? And I can select the appropriate pattern during the entry of this item. These things can also be dimensional. So I have an example here that is showing for the door jamb. How do we want to calculate the quantity that is required for our materials? Well, we actually want to use a formula. And that formula is going to look at the door height, multiply it by the door width, and then multiply that by 2 to give us the total amount of this material that we need to utilize during production. So Acumatica can get very granular with how we set up the configuration. I believe there's even one in there that has like a 10 different items for one formula set up. So you can get pretty specific with how those calculations take place. And then when you're going through and putting them on a sales order, which I will do in my last moment of this demonstration, you're going to see that that configuration can be utilized right on the sales order or quote level. So when I enter in that item, that single hung doors item, what I'm going to see is I now have a button available called Configure. and that's going to launch that configuration entry screen, which shows me what we just saw on the configuration setup. So I can select the pattern, same options that we were just looking at over there, decide which pattern I'd like to use. I'll see these turn green as I have met the associated conditions. And these conditions can even be rules-based. So a rules-based example would be, if the paint on that door is going to be black, then we don't want any engraving on that door to also be black because we won't be able to read it. So you can set up those include and exclude rules that will help and give some more guidance as you're entering the specific engineering functionality or engineering options, I should say, for the good that is being produced. And I didn't fill out my door height here, which is going to give me the quantity required over on the left for my options down on my jam. Okay, now that is about it as far as what I wanted to highlight for this demo. Like I said, there is a lot more functionality that we can look at together. Just in the essence of time today, we wanted to give you a little bit of an overview or a teaser as to what you can expect with the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition. I'm going to stop at this point and hand it back to the algorithm team, and I will look out for any additional requests if there's anyone on the phone today that would like to set up a more specific demonstration for your individual organizations. I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll send it back to the algorithm team.
Jessica, wow, 45 minutes, that was a lot. Appreciate it, that was great. So I'm going to talk quickly about why we partnered with Acumatica while you think about any questions that you might want to pose. There's a chat window. If you drag your mouse kind of down towards the bottom of the window, you'll see a bunch of circles. And there's a speech bubble there, and that will open up a chat window to the right. Or there's a Q&A button somewhere under the ellipses. So either the chat or the Q&A. So when we launched our search for a product that we could bring into Algorithm after 25 years with Macola, we were looking for a few things. We were looking obviously for something that was competitive in price in the mid-market, though we were looking for something with a SaaS model and more of a subscription model. We believed that we were right at the crook of the cloud technology taking off, and sat out a few years waiting for that to come around and for other products to mature in that area. Had to have a real good underlying technology. Absolutely had to have a solid manufacturing, which Jessica's done a great job of presenting. And it needed a strong ISV community. Our Macola ISV community has been pretty small. And we did our due diligence and worked through all of the products that are on the market out there, and we settled on Acumatica. What we didn't realize was some of the things we've since learned. Ease of use. If you sit in on a 45-minute demo like you just did with Jessica, you practically know how to navigate the entire system. And they have won award after award after award for ease of use. And we hear it every time. We hear people, you get about 10 minutes into a demo and they can anticipate what the next step is as we move from screen to screen and function to function. We have a strong need. We wanted a very strong development platform. We've always made it a point to be able to meet the customer demands of feature function that maybe out-of-the-box software doesn't have. Macola has been pretty weak in that area. What we have found is actually Acumatica started as a development platform and grew into an ERP, which is backwards from most of our experience in the market, where they're ERP companies and they try and find an API. Acumatica started as a development platform and goes from there, and we've been able to do some pretty amazing things with the tools that come with Acumatica. We also needed something that would get us into some other markets. As much as we love manufacturing, we wanted to see if we could get into things like field service and a couple of others that we've never really had a product for. And so there is a strong a number of other areas that we can get into in terms of retail, in terms of e-com, in terms of field service that we really couldn't before. And we have found that Acumatica is the disruptor in this market. They're anxious to win. They're very aggressive. Their management team is as locked in as any I've ever seen. and they're gonna do well. They're gonna grow significantly, and we're glad to be along for the ride. As for algorithm, we have been working pretty hard, and now not everyone who's on the phone is a Macola customer, so this will be to the Macola customers more specifically, but we have been working very hard on a conversion utility to bring our Macola customers forward. And Acumatica has been working with us very carefully to work out an aggressive price for our Macola customers to make the move. So we're going to be talking to our customers about that more in the month to come, but wanted to let you know that that was out there. So those are reasons that we have been working with Acumatica in the past 18 months, have really fallen in love with the product and with the company. So I've opened up the chat window. If there's a question anyone has, I can answer, or we can get back to you at another time, or Jessica's still on the phone. Anyone have a question that we can help you out with? So here's one chatted in is what is the system browser irrespective, and the answer to that is yeah. We'll work with Chrome, Firefox, Edge. Yes. So irrespective of that. Any other questions that we can answer today? Please feel free to chat them over. Okay, we won't belabor it. If you have some, you can email anyone at Algorithm, and we will be glad to answer those quickly. Oh, there's one just came in. I'm sorry. How customizable is the view, and what are metrics like? Yeah, that was we covered that early on. Jessica, do you want to just put up your initial dashboard again, and we can just touch on that a little bit? I'm sorry? Oh, Jessica's muted. Hold on a second. There, she's unmuted herself. She knew what to do. So go ahead. You want to do that, Jessica?
Yes. Sorry, what exactly is the question there?
How customizable is that view, and what are the metrics like?
Gotcha. So the metrics that you're seeing are all driven from what we call generic inquiries in Acumatica, and those inquiries are really just based on conditions that you set to pull that data in. So what we mean by that is if there is data that exists within Acumatica, you can pull it out to a dashboard. It's very easy to personalize these, and I did highlight this very briefly before just so we could save some time here. But what you're going to see is you can remove items from these dashboards quite easily, and you can also add items. So if an inquiry does exist, you can decide if you want to build a chart. A data table would just be a listing of information. We can pull in embedded pages, headers, etc. There's a number of different ways to do that at the dashboard level. If you're looking to go further than that, you can also use generic inquiries themselves. So if I just drill into an example of an inquiry, what I'm seeing here is a production summary, so it's showing me all of my production orders that exist right now. But as one example, maybe I'm only interested in seeing the production orders for this month. I can filter down to that information very quickly and easily. Or maybe I'm only interested in seeing the production that I have out there in my production schedule for this one customer. Very easy to get down to that information quickly and easily. So quite a few answers that we could spend time on here. Dashboards, inquiries. There are ways to pull in data from systems like Power BI, but I think you'll find that your options are pretty unlimited as far as analytics.
And a number of those come out of the box, right, Jessica? I mean, we kind of get down the road in every area. There's one for customers, one for production, one for inventory, and several of those that are like predefined to stop you from having to recreate the entire dashboard from the start, or you can.
Yep, that's correct.
Jessica, a question came in too about light versus heavy manufacturing, what we may call heavy manufacturing. There's one manufacturing method in core Acumatica, right?
Are you talking about kitting?
Yeah, or maybe just light work order where you don't have to report labor. It's simply just report finished goods and let it backflush the entire bill of material kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's not going to be really out of the box unless you're using kitting specifically. Kitting is going to allow you to set up basically a finished kit with components underneath that. You could also put labor costs against that if you'd like. And what you lose with kitting is there's going to be no operations or work in process or really any of the in-between steps that you get with manufacturing edition. It's just going to take those component parts out of inventory and roll them up into a finished good.
Yeah, and I think that's really that's what McCullough has, what they call POP or light manufacturing. That's exactly what it does. It just backflushes those things and you report finished goods. So that would be an equivalent on a McCullough functionality. Any other questions that we can answer while we've got you on the phone? We like to keep these informative but yet on time, so anyone else? All right, we're going to call it that. We will be in touch. We're going to record this, or we've recorded this. We'll have it on our website, and we'll mail that out to you if you want to revisit or share it with any of your team. But we appreciate you joining us. We'll be doing a couple more of these. Watch for the calendar, and we'll have different areas of the system, different presenters. And Jessica, I can't thank you enough for joining us today and doing that.
Absolutely, not a problem.
All right, thanks all. We're going to end the meeting now. We appreciate your time. Thanks much. Bye-bye.